Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 178 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Bill Sutton. Today, we're going to go over a blog article like we do every week, and with me, like most weeks, are a couple of astute gentlemen from Citrix, Geremy Meyers and Todd Smith. Geremy, you want to say hello to our listeners?
Bill, I feel like you're buttering me up, calling me astute, but I'll take it. Bill, Todd, certainly good to see you, as
Good to see you
always.
too. Yeah,
Good to see you.
yeah. It's been a few weeks since we've done this.
It has been a few weeks, and I was thinking about this earlier today. So we're on 178. We've got to do something for our bicentennial, number 200 podcast, which we might get to by the end of the year if we're doing.
We might get to that by the end of the. We could get to that. That's 32 more, so we could get to that if we did them every week, which we all know doesn't always happen. So by the end of the year, yeah. One of my colleagues that we have a colleague.
You mean 22 more, Bill.
22. Yes, it would be 20. It's that new math. I'm sorry. We definitely get it to 200. Yeah, we should do something for our 200th. I have a colleague that does the Nutanix weekly podcast, because Nutanix is obviously one of our partners and very complimentary to Citrix and vice versa. They just hit 100, I think, last week. So they're catching on us. They're catching up, but we keep going. We'll stay. 78 ahead is right many. I think I did that math right, Todd?
Yes.
So Todd Smith, thank you. He's also on with us. That's the voice you heard in the background. Todd, you want to say hello to our listeners?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Kind of like Geremy said, he's never been called astute. I'm usually called stout, not astute.
Yeah. I get that, Todd. I get that about you. Guy with the nickname Tiny. That's kind of a tongue-in-cheek type thing, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He does have another name that we like to use because Todd just knows things. In fact, he knows things that you think no one knows. He just plucks them out of the air, and it's amazing. So we also call him Big Data because he is just a plethora of information. Yeah.
Now, is that information like useless information or really good information?
Oh, both? It can be any combination of that, Bill.
Okay.
Everything from old technologies that are no longer there to current trends to, as Geremy knows, boy band trivia.
Oh boy,
I concur. Maybe, I've seen that in action, by the way.
Maybe we do a trivia contest at some point. I don't know. So
maybe that could be the theme of our 200th episode.
Yeah, for sure.
We have a quick little 6 degrees of separation for boy bands.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to do a blog article today that's entitled "What's New with Citrix? Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops 2503 is now generally available." It's by Bill Gray, who I believe is a CTO, field CTO with Citrix. So I'll start off here. I mean, obviously, 2503 I think it was just last week. This was officially dropped and was available for download. And again, this is the primarily the on-premises version of the solution, but I believe the VDA 2503 that comes with this or is a part of this would obviously be leveraged by anybody running DAS. Correct, gentlemen?
Correct, gentlemen.
Yep. I went from astute to gentleman, so,
Man, I'm curious to know what's going to happen next.
Rare. So as with any release that Citrix comes out with, like this one, there are new features and functionality in the platform, and that's part of what we're going to cover today. I think there's 4 or 5 in here that we're going to cover that at a high level. There's probably a lot more than this, but these are the ones that we've chose that the blog article is focusing on. So the first one, well, let me stop there. You guys want to set this up in any way from your perspective before I move into the actual content?
No, I mean, listen, it's 2503. Typically that means March 2025, but clearly this is May, so the numbering might be a little off. You're not confused. Sometimes they push a little bit, which is, I think, was what happened here. But this is indeed the most recent release, even though it says 03. But you know what? I think there are some themes in this particular blog post. I think of the think of the 4 or 5 different things we covered here. 3 of them are pieces that were specifically in the DaaS version of the product that have again made it into the on-prem. So this is a big deal, especially when you consider, I think there was a point, I forget, Todd, when this was, where the on-prem product did not support cloud workloads, or it did.
Sure.
Actually, I take that back. You had to be on subscription, and you could use CVAD, the on-premise version of the product, to actually connect and deploy workloads that sit in a public cloud such as Azure or GCP or AWS, but some of the feature set didn't quite match it. So for instance, and I think this kind of leads into the first one here, auto scaling is a pretty big topic for customers who are attempting to manage compute costs in these public clouds, right? So the idea being auto scale has been a feature in the cloud, the DaaS product for some time. Listen, we just want to properly power manage and sort of scale up, scale down, not just power manage, but even burst if we need to, but auto scale your cloud workloads just to make the best use of your money in the cloud, because it can get quite pricey if you leave it on all the time. So this was the idea. I think this has gotten just a bit more helpful to the admin in the sense that, part of the idea of setting a schedule is really understanding what the schedule needs to be. And I think this is what we've added here.
It's always been one of the challenges, right, Geremy, is what do you set this stuff to without really knowing how it's going to be used or how it is used? And I see it. I kind of thought it was interesting when I first read this. In the first sentence, a new auto scale settings tab called, quote, actionable insights. Is it any wonder why those initials are AI? I think it's just a coincidence in this instance.
I think it's a coincidence, but not wrong.
Yeah. But nevertheless, I think, the importance of this is, like Geremy said, is to help you control costs, and it gives you lets you leverage the intelligence from the system to say, how was it used last week? Let's take that as a baseline, if you will, or last couple of weeks, and apply that to the going forward, and then continue to monitor it. And that way we better understand usage patterns and can get it more closely tailored to what we need, and that way keep the cost down.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of mirroring exactly what's happening in a lot of other subscription services or a lot of other environments that we're used to on a regular basis of using. And that is, if you have, for instance, every month I get a report from like Uber or Lyft or something like that saying, hey, here's all the trips you took. And if you had chosen these, you would have saved this much money, or it's something that I can then change my behavior, which would the result would be saving some cost on my part by being able to do that. It's taking a lot of those same principles and bringing them into the auto scale capabilities. But yes, the ability to kind of look at what your planned usage was and what your actual usage was, and then be able to then take that next step and kind of adjust as needed is absolutely critical. When you start talking about, this is the equivalent of you taking a taxi ride and having the taxi sit out front of your house with the meter running all night long, waiting for you to get ready to take it in the morning.
Right.
It's not cost effective.
No, absolutely.
I mean, I love that this is a weekly feedback loop as well, because of course we all know things change over time. And my first thought was, do I need to spin up more machines? But I think the other side of this is, am I making too much capacity available on a weekly basis at certain times of the day that I can dial up and dial back? So this is pretty clever, actually.
Well, it's always been kind of a black art, if you will, in terms of knowing how many to have stood up or have actually ready when a logon storm occurs, or when the beginning of the day. And now with, a lot of folks working from home, it's even more difficult. It's not like, most people will be in their seats at 8 o'clock or 8:30. It could be 9, it could be 7:30. And by being able to take a look back on a kind of a rolling basis, this week, look at last week, next week, look at the so on, helps you refine it better to more tailor to the usage patterns, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really kind of adjusting to that rhythm of the business approach.
Yeah. When you look at the graphic here, so we're looking at this on a per delivery group basis. So when you think about that, typically delivery groups map to different user personas, right? So
right.
This wouldn't be the same across the business, but you might have them. Just thinking of a bank, you might have loan originators who might need a certain kind of thing. You might have tellers in the bank using VDI for desktops, and depending on times of the year, especially if we're thinking about tax season, which, listen, I realize banks aren't necessarily doing taxes, but there could be different times of the year where, it's more common to have a loan, or it just would change, and it could be based on that user persona, which is pretty clever.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. You can do it by delivery group.
Mm-hmm.
To your point. So, all right, we'll move on then, unless there's any other comments on this one, to the next topic, which is homepage for Web Studio. So I think this goes back to what you said earlier, Geremy, in terms of we're bringing a lot of cloud functionality down to basically Web Studio, which is typically the management framework, or at least the window into the management framework. It looks like this has changed a lot, and looks a lot more like what the cloud looked like, right?
Yeah, and this is a huge step forward, because not only do we change the look and feel to make it consistent with what you see in the cloud, but also it's very much driven around business processes, right?
Mhm.
So onboarding a new user, making a move, add, and change, being able to see it from the high level and kind of working your way down. Those are things that really weren't intuitive when you kind of went back to the old MMM or MMC Studio type of approach. That was very much geared towards the hardcore administrator who knew how to work their way through the console. This is much more of an interactive, intuitive experience.
Absolutely. Any
Now,
thoughts on that, Geremy?
what I love about this is we have started. So I don't know about specifically this web studio because I haven't had a chance to dive into it just yet, but I know with DAS, what's nice about it is we've started inserting updates and recommendations and things right in that landing page as well. So for instance, if you've got a catalog that might, if we get a recommendation around a machine catalog in particular, here we go. I'd love to get started here. So more of a tie-in, I guess, to, how to get started, how to build, how to start from scratch if you're kind of new to this. But, I would imagine, in the future, being able to see things like alerts around, oh, by the way, this is misconfigured, or by the way, there's a new version of this, right in this landing page as well. Just a better workflow.
Yeah. For sure.
And this is also taking some of the work that we've done with some of our other consoles, like NetScaler console as an example, being able to push information out to the administrators, right? And think about it from the CVE notification process that's in the NetScaler console, being able to say, for these devices or these instances, here's some recommendations, or here's some updates that are applicable. Being much more intuitive. And Bill, you mentioned it earlier around the AI piece of it. This is where AI is going to start helping not only the end users from a tool perspective, but also the admins from an operational improvement. If we can start gathering some of this information and providing some prescriptive type of activities that need to be taken, it's going to be some huge improvements around that area.
Be interesting to see how it evolves, for sure. All right, one of my favorite things here is around storage. And this is the next section is titled "Optimize Storage Load Balancing with the Least Load Method." This is interesting to me because none of us have ever dealt with slowness, and I've run into this going back pretty much my whole career. There were always occasions where storage was slow or storage was overcommitted, causing it to be slow. And there wasn't a whole lot you could do other than expand, add capacity or get in and do an analysis to get data off of there or get workloads moved elsewhere, et cetera. It sounds like this is a load balancing algorithm to balance the load between data stores, which is very interesting. You guys have any thoughts on this?
I mean, much like the network, where it's never the network, it's never the storage, is what I have heard. But what's interesting about this is I don't know that we typically, as a Citrix admin, I don't know that we typically understand or know or have a feel for the status of the storage, right? So we just know in the past, I'm going to use a word that's probably a little bit dated. There's a LUN out there, there's a volume out there, there's something out there that I can deploy to, and I will just deploy to it. It's the idea that it sounds like it sounds like maybe this is for provisioning of new machines. So my first thought was, is this for when I launch a session, especially if it's pulled, is it going to direct me to, a storage volume that's that has least load? But it sounds like when we're provisioning new machines, which that makes sense actually, just
Yeah.
taking into consideration where, this available space, the number of powered on machines, and where does it make sense to go land this pool of VMs I'm about to provision.
Yeah, it'd be great if it was a little bit more intuitive when you were saying, "Hey, I'm going to spin up I need a set of virtual machines or machines that are going to be able to satisfy the following personas." And maybe the personas are the in-depth knowledge workers, or those what we used to refer to as super users. The folks that are managing engineering workloads as opposed to, a frontline bank teller, as an example, where you know what their pattern is going to be over the course of time, then assign them to the appropriate storage options that are out there. Give them solid state drives, or give them access to, better performing. And it kind of goes back to, this is the old hierarchical storage models that were out there, where you put your data that requires, or the data that you need to access quickly, you put that into memory. You put the next one is solid state drives. The one after that is spinning disk, and the one below that is, pull it off of tape or some type of offline nearline storage.
Yeah.
So I wonder how this works. I wonder if this is during the initial machine creation process, when it goes out and says, all right, let me go look at all the volumes I have access to. Is it going to make a recommendation? Hey, you should really stick it on this particular one based on this feedback. Because I got to think, once you've provisioned out to a volume, it probably sits there unless you do something like move the storage later. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, it looks like provisioning new machines, but to your point, if you got a catalog that's going to LUN or storage repository A, and you provision additional machines for that machine catalog, is it going to automatically put them on A, or is it going to put them on a different one? And I don't know that's clear in here, but it looks like it has the ability. And I absolutely, I think if you were to create a new machine catalog, it'd be invoked to figure out what's the best location for it. Based on load of current workloads, as well as storage availability, or available space.
There's a double click in here we got to go sort out, Bill. But
Yep.
I love it.
Yep. All right, we'll move to the next one. This one is improved display rendering quality with intelligent build-to-lossless feature. So the build-to-lossless feature has been around for a while, right, guys? And I think what this is designed to make it more efficient, where it doesn't need to be manually configured by the admin. It's just there and turned on by default and applied dynamically. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the feature where, particularly if you're dealing with high graphics, medical imaging, engineering, and you rotate that car that we're showing that's in the blog article, you'll see it go kind of grainy while you rotate it, and then when you stop, it snaps back to perfect. That's kind of the concept of build to lossless, but you usually have to configure that via policy, as I recall. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be a configuration setting. It was limited to delivery group, I believe, right? You couldn't do it on individual machines.
No, I think it's based on delivery group. And when you think about it, though, I think in a lot of organizations, there's scenarios where you don't need this. At the end of the day, you've got LAN connected users who just need the bandwidth, which is fine. But of course, I think what we've seen the most is, remote users trying to do this. And it's really hard because you don't want to, anytime you need to lock a setting in, it usually works for the scenario it's meant to work for. But when it's not needed, you're kind of locked into using it. And so what I love about this is it's very dynamic. So it's as if you can turn this on, this feature on, this setting on, and it will dynamically do it, meaning, it'll build to lossless if you need it. But the minute you don't, it dials back again. It's just meant to, obviously leverage the bandwidth efficiently, depending on the load, which is interesting because we're getting a lot more information about the network connection than we did before as well. So I know this is not what this is about, but the fact that we can pull in things like, Wi-Fi signal and network latency and bandwidth and all the things that usually require some other tool. It's just baked into the Workspace app. It's bubbled up into Monitor now, so you can actually go see it. But I love the fact that this is very dynamic.
Well, not only is it pulling in network information, it's also pulling in information about what capabilities the endpoint itself has.
Mhm.
And especially critical around things like graphics processing, as well as, what are the other environment conditions that could impact, that whole graphics experience.
Yeah. Good point. So, all right, now we're going to move to the next one, director integration with UberAgent, which I know is something Geremy was very interested in talking about from the emails we exchanged. So, UberAgent, of course, I'll set it up, is a product that was added to the Universal Hybrid Multi-Cloud and Citrix platform layer SKUs 2 years ago. I think that's right. 2 years, 1 year, 1 year ago.
I think a year ago. Yeah, 1 year ago. Yep.
Yeah, a year ago, Citrix bought the company that developed this, and at the time it was, and it still is, you could standalone install and you'd have to deploy the agent to your VDAs and so forth. But now there's a lot more integration with actually Director, and I believe that the UberAgent is going to either currently is part of the, oh, it says it, selecting it from the optional software screen during the VDA setup, or you can install it yourself manually. So, Geremy, I know you wanted to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There have been two bits of objection as it relates to UberAgent, just based on our experiences and working with customers over the last 12 months. So, the first one is yet another piece of software that I have to install that if I can get out of doing, that would be fantastic. So at a high level, this is great because now it's included with the VDA. There's still a standalone component because, of course, there are scenarios where you want to install this outside of Citrix, outside of, just various places that you'd want to include it. But the fact that it's now included by default means without thinking, you can have the bits for UberAgent installed along with the VDA. And now I can start collecting information that, I want to bubble up and make available. Now, the second piece of this is equally exciting is, I've got customers who want to leverage this technology, but they're not a Splunk customer. So Let me start by saying, UberAgent can actually funnel this information into a few different platforms, right? But, the best experience right now is Splunk because we've already got a lot of the dashboarding built to just make the information usable, right? But of course, we have customers who aren't using Splunk. What do these guys do? Well, we're not funneling everything in Director, but you can kind of see that we can bubble some things up and actually make that available into Citrix Director or Monitor if that's the platform you're using. So it's pretty exciting. So out of the gate, I think this first iteration will collect information around the applications that users are running within their desktop. So for instance, if you had a VDI session and you wanted to get a feel for, well, listen, what are my users doing? What applications are they using?
Yeah.
Boom, we can pull that from UberAgent, funnel that into Director, and that will show up inside of Director as applications. Just a bit of feedback, just metrics around what's being used. So if I'm trying to rationalize, my footprint, or if I'm just trying to get a feel for what's installed or how it's performing, we're starting to collect that. That is making its way into Director directly. So it's pretty exciting, sort of the trajectory of where the product stack is headed.
Yeah, and it's moved pretty quick too. I mean, to get more data into Director, I didn't expect that when the acquisition happened. I figured this would just be a standard, standalone type and interface. And then when I think they talked about this a little bit at the Connect event I went to last year, and then a couple of briefings that we did, as XenTegra did down at headquarters in Fort Lauderdale. There's a lot of discussion around bubbling up more data to Director. I don't know if it's coming directly from UberAgent or they're just leveraging some of the metrics that you can get out of it to bubble that up into Director and manage it differently.
I had that question recently. I think there's a virtual channel set aside. Okay. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's a virtual channel set aside either. I don't think there was a new one created, but either way, that funnels that data in. When you think about what Director is meant to be, I mean, it's not an all-encompassing monitoring tool. I mean, it's meant to be a help desk tool, right? So what information could we pluck from UberAgent data that would make the help desk more, just get more insights into what's going on and help troubleshoot a problem? I think that's probably where the direction is headed. Like, Splunk will continue to be, a spot for that. I've actually got someone on my team who's funneling things into Azure and building their own dashboards, which is pretty exciting. But, we also, support, Kafka and Grafana as well. So, there's different areas these things go to, but more importantly, just the data is being collected and can be used, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. Well, let me
Yeah,
ask
I've
a
got
question here, Jeremy. You may or may not know the answer. I don't know. To get this information in Director, do you need to install the UberAgent software on the VDA, or is that only needed if you're doing full UberAgent?
Now, to get any of the bits, any of that data that UberAgent can pull, you have to select that from the optional software
Okay.
inside the agent setup. Yep.
Okay.
Which, by the way, if you
Yeah, I
want to keep it lane, you don't want to do it, you can certainly not select it, but
Right.
that's really the advantage here.
Yeah, I think one critical thing here, Bill, is that we've got a lot of customers. I've got a customer in British Columbia that's actually built an entire set of dashboards where they're pulling information out of Director and running it in through some Power BI dashboards to visualize the information. But the key is they're also, because it is Power BI based, they're actually able to go pull information from a variety of different sources.
Right.
And
Right.
be able to actually tie it in with things like information out of the HR database to understand where the person's coming in from, what their address is, what their physical address is, because then they can start correlating things like, is it a local ISP issue? Is it a, best ways to contact the person? A variety of different pieces of data that actually gives visibility into the help desk to actually be much more successful in their overall ticket management.
That's really
When you think
interesting.
about it, Todd, I guess probably not an exact parallel, but kind of like the OData API that we've got in Directors. I mean, it's probably not that much different. It's just the amount of data and the kinds of data.
Correct.
It's more extensive with UberAgent, and it sounds like your customers they found the info they want, and they got an idea of what they're looking for and how they want to correlate, and it's pretty interesting actually.
Yeah, the other question that's come up a couple times around this integration with UberAgent is around things like sizing. How much more data is going to be dumped into the Director databases? How do we manage the pruning of that? What else can it be used for? So that's one question. The other question is how quickly it's going to be integrated fully with like the Workspace app, so that you don't have to go through the additional installation process and add another agent.
Right. Right. Good point. Yeah.
Well, I think what's nice about that scenario is now we could capture and improve the experience for BYO devices, right? So for instance, if I'm on a managed corporate device, listen, I might not want to install another agent, but the fact that it's managed means that's an option, right? But eventually, if it's just baked right into Workspace app, then, again, I'm still pushing the same load I had before, but at the same time, I can probably, I can potentially grab more insights into my BYO devices as well, which.
Yeah, that really takes it to another level to some degree, to be able to monitor those endpoints and bring them into the estate, as real participants. And by doing that, just deploying the Workspace app and it's embedded. And like you said, you don't have to worry about another install or another agent. All right. Good stuff. Really good stuff. So that's the end of the blog. So 2503, CVAD 2503 is already available. You can download it from the download site. Obviously, if any of our listeners need help with any of these topics, they can reach out to their XenTegra salesperson or their Citrix ATS. If they have one that's assigned, which most enterprise customers will, reach out to either us or the ATS to help go over any of this stuff, or if you need assistance, or of course, if you have support issues, call support. Any other thoughts, guys, before we adjourn for the day?
No, I think we're good, Bill. Appreciate it.
Good.
Happy Monday. Happy Cinco de Mayo. We'll just
Cinco de Mayo. That's right. We're recording this on Cinco de Mayo. So hope everyone, when you hear this, had a good Cinco de Mayo and stay safe. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Todd.